in America, we kind of have the sense that the world revolves around us, that we are at the center of everything, and in many ways we kind of are. But we also have this false sense of reality, and we feel like we would know things first before any other country. But the reality is that some people in America are so out of touch with reality that a lot of the big things going on in the world, we don't take them seriously. We feel like it won't affect us. And in the case of World War III or a possible nuclear war, it honestly feels like Americans will be the last ones to know or the last ones to take it seriously, even though you would think it would be the other way around, but it's not. Because you can take right now, for example. As I reported to you all, Biden has given Ukraine the go-ahead to use these long-range missiles in Russia. Well, Ukraine started using them, and Russia has responded. And Russia has basically put it out there that, hey, once these missiles come into play, we're officially at war with NATO. We're not just fighting Ukraine. We're going to officially basically acknowledge that we're at war with NATO, and nuclear war is on the table. It's all the way on the table. In fact, we're going to rewrite and restructure our doctrines just to let you know that we can respond to some of these attacks with nuclear weapons. That's happening right now as we speak. Meanwhile, most of Americans are wrapped up in P. Diddy nonsense or some other stuff that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, okay? Now, as America is sitting by, a lot of Americans are cheering Biden on like seals. They don't realize what this means, so they're happy about this. The rest of America has no idea this is even going on because here in America, our heads are often up our own asses, and we're not worried about everything else going on in the world because we feel like the rest of the world should be worried about us. But Biden has given Ukraine the go-ahead to use these missiles. This is a very big deal in the rest of the world, but it's not a big deal here because most people are numb to the reality of what's going on. So as people cheer Biden on, as people totally ignore that anything is even happening in Ukraine and Russia, other countries are preparing their citizens for nuclear war. Finland and Sweden, for example, they're straight up telling their citizens, hey, nuclear war is very close. They're out here passing out pamphlets and making plans for nuclear strikes on their territories. Meanwhile, in America, we're all just acting like nothing's going on. The rest of the country is the rest of the world is preparing for nuclear war. And it's not just Finland and Sweden, but I want to tell you about what's going on over in Sweden right now. Sweden tells citizens to prepare for war. 5 million households get pamphlets on how to get their home ready for nuclear Armageddon as Biden is accused of trying to start World War III. Sweden is sending out 5 million pamphlets to residents urging them to prepare for the possibility of war with instructions on how to stockpile food and even seek shelter during a nuclear attack as fears grow of a conflict between Russia and NATO. Since the start of the war in Ukraine, Stockholm has repeatedly urged Swedes to prepare both mentally and logistically for a possible conflict, citing the worsening security situation in its vicinity. It comes as tensions between Moscow and the West have escalated to new heights after Joe Biden gave Ukraine the green light to blast targets deep inside Russia with U.S.-supplied long-range missiles, which Donald Trump's son has criticized as making sure they get World War III going before my father gets a chance to create peace. The booklet, If Crisis or War Comes, sent out by the Swedish Civil Contingencies Agency, contains information about how to prepare for emergencies such as war, natural disasters, cyber attacks, and terrorism. An insecure world requires preparedness. The military threat to Sweden has increased, and we must prepare for the worst. An armed attack, its new introduction states. In one of the more worrying excerpts, which harks back to advice given by governments during the darkest days of the Cold War, it informs people of the risk of nuclear weapons. The global security situation increases the risk that nuclear weapons could be used in the event of an attack with nuclear, biological, or chemical weapons. Take cover in the same way as in an air attack, the pamphlet instructs readers. Shelter provides the best protection. After a couple of days, the radiation has decreased significantly. It advises, adding that people will be warned of attacks over the radio and should go to their basements or subways if there is no better option. Another message, which has been brought forward from the middle of the booklet in the updated version, reads, if Sweden is attacked by another country, we will never ever give up. All information to the effect that resistance is to cease is false. So Sweden's telling their people, hey, nuclear war is very close. It's actually very likely. Here's how you respond to it. And guess what? If we get invaded, we're never going to stop fighting. We don't care what messages you see about stand down, surrender or what have you. Never surrender. Keep fighting. They're already instilling their people like, hey, war is probably coming and we're going to fight to the bitter end. Meanwhile, in America, we're all dancing and gyrating around, twerking and doing stuff like that because we are out of touch with the reality of this situation. Completely out of touch. But I want to go ahead and roll this news clip, and then I'll be right back with more thoughts.
News out of the war in Ukraine. Fox News can confirm that Ukrainian forces have struck Russia using long-range U.S.-made missiles. President Biden approved their use just days ago. Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin is approving a revised nuclear doctrine that lowers the threshold for a nuclear response. Meanwhile, our NATO allies, Finland and Sweden, are now telling citizens to prepare for war. Sweden out with this new video informing residents on how to stockpile food, baby food, medication, and how to seek shelter during a nuclear attack. Sweden also sent out more than 5 million of these pamphlets there on your screen. And Finland posted one on its website, both urging citizens to prepare for the possibility of war and how to prepare for such. Kara, frightening developments. What do you say about this specific response by Finland and Sweden?
Well, I think it's going to further impress upon them the need to really take control of their own security situation. As we know, the United States has been providing that security blanket for a lot of these NATO countries for so long. This is a wake-up call. You don't want to be alarmist, but whenever Putin says something that references nuclear powers, and those ATACMS, they're U.S. supplied. So I think that is something to consider. So we need to think very seriously. Not saying it's World War III, but NATO does need to start taking more responsibility for its own situation. Trump he's articulated that. And so far, it looks like, okay, they're going to. So this is probably the first step in that direction in a very tactical way. But just investing in those, the increased percentages of what we really need to have a geopolitical situation that is better for the United States, frankly, and better for Europe. I think they're going to start going there. I don't like this escalation. New National Security Advisor incoming said it best when this is an escalation ladder. We don't know where it leads. I think that's very correct. But I also think that we have an opportunity with Trump and his new team to come in and right the ship. And I believe that we'll do that. We don't want this axis to grow, North Korea, Iran, China. But I think with Trump going to be in office January 20th, we are going to be in a better situation than we actually are right now, God willing.
So, Charles, Kara mentions the escalation ladder. Right. I mean, the top rung is telling your citizens to prepare for nuclear war. And not since the Cold War has that been sort of accepted as practice. And it's been an incredibly long time since that incredibly frightened state of hysteria that the country was in. And that's where Finland and Sweden are now.
That's where they are now. It's sort of Sunday morning quarterbacking, but we the Biden administration mishandled this from the beginning, right? I mean, they had over a year of knowledge that the invasion was going to happen, did absolutely nothing, nothing to deter Russia, zero. Then once it happened, they made a series of clumsy moves. Economically, they took Russia off a system that everyone in the world uses. And a lot of folks say, you know what, I never want the U.S. to take me off it. That, now we have a big counterforce economically that's happening. In the meantime, we gave Russia the weapons they needed too late. And this is a move of desperation right now. This is a move of desperation. And that's when things escalate out of control, when they become desperate. And we're in a dual race right now before this becomes something where America is actively involved in another world war, or somehow some sort of armistice or treaty is met. But right now, it's an equal race, in my opinion, and Trump can't get in there soon enough. Now, here's the good news. Russia, their reserves have gone down dramatically recently. Germany finally said, we won't take your natural gas. How the hell were they buying natural gas from Russia in the first place? So a lot of things are going against Russia right now, but it's escalating. And you mentioned the evil axis, or the new axis of evil. I read somewhere to potentially 100,000 North Korean soldiers being involved. So it's got to be nipped in the bud, or it's going to be out of everyone's control soon.
So, and posturing, though, Kayleigh, if we talk about the posturing of Putin and the mission creep we talked about yesterday, the North Koreans, but the reality is Finland and Sweden are telling their citizens now to prepare for nuclear war, and that seems incredibly hyperbolic. Or is reality truly there, right over a fine line? Is that where we really are?
It is where we are.
Yes, ma'am.
Biden has made a mess of the world. He is like the child in the candy store that cannot stop breaking things. Look, when you look back, Obama warned Trump about North Korea in their Oval Office meeting. Well, what happened with North Korea? Trump made relations better. They stopped firing missiles after he met with North Korea. Then you have Biden lecturing him on the Ukraine war. Meanwhile, Russia says, we're ready to talk. So now Biden thinks it's time to get long-range missiles into Russia when they indicate to the incoming administration they are ready to talk and maybe wrap up this war somehow. I mean, the Taliban wants a new chapter. Hamas wants an end to the war immediately. China wants peaceful coexistence. That's because the peace through strength guy, Donald Trump, is coming back. He just started receiving intel briefings, according to the Washington Post. He got his first one shortly after his election. January 20th can't come soon enough. It's time for the kid in the candy store to go home and just sit back and think about what he's done.
Look, I'm with Kara on this. And Nikki Haley has said it, too, the former U.S. ambassador to the UN for the United States. We know that she had firsthand experience. When a dictator tells you what he's going to do, he's going to do it. And so now we have poked the bear. 62 days until Inauguration Day, Biden decides to do what he could have done 999 days ago when this started. And remember, I'm not going to say that his words caused Russia to invade Ukraine. Let's just say they didn't help. Minor incursion. This is the man who said that in the face of a dictator saying what he was going to do. And now in the face of a dictator saying, if you land a missile in Russia and it's got a U.S. marking on it, that's an act of war. Who doesn't believe him? Now, I know that things have gotten a little dicey for their economy, and you're absolutely right about that, Charles. But we don't know the input capacity of North Korea. They're not martyrs necessarily. Right. But for a government to get away from that level of communism and distrust and abuse of its citizens, maybe they would go to Russia to fight with some hope of getting freedom one day. You don't know what their impulse is. There certainly are reportedly a number of them on the ground inside of Russia now. So they're hitting today for the first time with Biden doing what he could have done to help Ukraine 2.73 years ago. And remember, Finland and Sweden have a reason to worry. So do we, by the way. When one attacked equals all of us attacked, right. Article 5, that enshrines us as a collective. We have to fight. This is too much. Biden has always been too much and too little too late. It's an odd, dangerous combination.
Yeah. Well, remember, he promised us in 2020 that the adult was coming back in the Oval Office, and clearly the adult is returning January 20th. And we hope that this Ukraine situation doesn't end like Afghanistan did, which is
we pray
horrifyingly.
Yeah. Look, folks, I know a lot of people feel bad about what's going on in Ukraine. And I know a lot of people are, I guess you would say, on Ukraine's side. And you may think that, oh, yes, finally, Ukraine's getting the help they need and stuff like that. Folks, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. You can think it's cool now. You will not think it's cool when you wake up and there's entire cities in America wiped off the map. If you think defending Ukraine's borders is worth World War III and destroying our entire planet, then I don't know what to tell you. We have to look at the situation realistically. And realistically, Ukraine is not going to win this war, at least not by themselves. They're not going to win this war without nuclear weapons, okay? Without totally wiping Russia off the map. So Ukraine basically has no way to win unless we destroy the entire world to ensure their victory. So I'm not willing to risk the entire world for Ukraine. I'm not willing to risk a single American life for Ukraine or Ukraine's borders or anything they got going on. Sorry, I'm not willing to do so. But we have to approach this situation realistically, and we have to understand the repercussions, the consequences that come with certain actions. So continuing to poke the bear, which is Russia, it's not in anyone's best interest. It's really not. I assure you, you could think it's cool to keep sending money and weapons. You're not going to think it's cool when we're sending thousands of young lives over there to the meat grinder. Because that's what Ukraine is. It's a freaking meat grinder, and we keep giving them money, and Ukraine's gotten to the point where they got a bunch of old men, people who have no business fighting. Ukraine literally has people with Down syndrome on the front lines fighting Russia. Okay? Because a lot of the young men have already been wiped out. They're sending old, disabled people, you name it, to the front lines, to the meat grinder, because that's what it is. The front lines is a straight up meat grinder. So, honestly, any type of peace talks, we should welcome them. And yeah, Ukraine is probably going to use, or probably going to lose certain areas of Ukraine, right? There's going to be certain areas of Ukraine that have been claimed by Russia. Unfortunate for them, but hey, guess what? If that's what it takes to ensure that we don't get further involved, then it is what it is. I'm telling you right now, even the most pro-Ukrainian person on earth, right? Or even the most pro-Ukrainian American, I don't think deep down you want what's coming. It's not worth it. Ukraine, it's not worth it. It's not worth the entire world. I'm sorry, but that's just what it is. I don't think Ukraine is worth another world war. But you let me know what you think down in the comments below. We're all free to have our own opinions here. While you're down there, hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe, ring that notification bell, and I'll talk to you all very soon in the next one.